Well, what's up, Mission? How's everybody doing this afternoon? Good. I want to welcome those that are also online, out in the lobby or on the patio. Today it's just really good to be together. My name is Jodi Hickerson. I am one of the teaching pastors around this place, and I'm really excited to kick off this brand new series today called Among Lions. We're going to be looking at the story of a guy named Daniel who lived a long time ago. His story is recorded in the Old Testament. There's actually a book of the Bible called Daniel named after him. Like, he got a whole book of the Bible for his story. And we're going to spend the next 6 weeks looking at some key moments in the life of Daniel and what God might want to speak to us through his life and story. And spoiler alert, when Daniel is like 80 years old, he does find himself thrown into a den of lions, like among lions. Actual lions, like hungry lions. And he finds himself there, and we see God's faithfulness to Daniel throughout his entire life is so remarkable. But also, Daniel's faithfulness to God is so remarkable. And it didn't start that day when he was 80 and he's in a lion's den. It actually started long before that. So we're going to kind of look at his origin story today, a time when Daniel is a young man and he finds himself needing to decide what to do when culture shifts. Like when culture just changes. And just so you know this, culture's always changing, right? We go through a lot of shifts in culture. In fact, sometimes it feels like there's like this tectonic plates underneath our feet where it's pretty easy to lose our footing in a constantly changing culture. I mean, if you think about this just in our own country, which, by the way, is only 250 years old, we have seen a lot of change, a lot of cultural change. Some of it good, some of it bad, some of it beautiful, some of it evil, and like everywhere in between. I mean, even if you're just looking at the last 7 decades of cultural shifts, anybody remember the 60s? I wasn't there, but I hear if you lived the 60s, you might not remember the 60s. That's just what I've heard. But the 60s brought with it the civil rights movement and the emergence of hippies and the anti-war movement and a second wave of feminism and a revolution of sorts with the soundtrack of the Beatles and Bob Dylan. With the 70s came disillusionment and individualism and new identities. Cynicism took hold in our culture in the wake of Watergate and Vietnam. A sexual revolution took off as well as an energy and economic crisis. In the 80s, culture became defined by consumerism and conservatism and media power. Like there was this pushback against the liberalism of the 60s and 70s, but also this awareness of an AIDS crisis and the emergence of yuppies and Wall Street and brand obsession and prosperity and the idea that greed is good. The 80s also brought the start of a media explosion with the launch of this little channel called MTV. The 90s, hello, best decade, okay, just kidding. The 90s where I learned you don't go chasing waterfalls. That's what the 90s were about. The 90s were actually an explosion of globalization and diversity and digital beginnings and boy bands. I mean, pop culture spread like crazy. Diversity was celebrated, immigration reshaped communities, and a tech revolution began. And all these subcultures began to emerge among young people, grunge and hip hop and rave. The term politically correct, PC, got introduced in the 90s, as well as there was like this more widespread moral and cultural debates that were happening on things like abortion and race and sexuality and family values, and those conversations intensified. In the 2000s, in the aftermath of 9/11, culture was shaped by terror and at the same time, technology. Information overload for the first time. MySpace and Facebook and smartphones and Google began to change the way that people connected. Online voices began to overshadow news outlets for the first time. And we see this shift in American families, more delayed marriage, more blended families, a change in gender roles. Overworking became really normal. It became a lot easier with the introduction of Blackberries or iPhones, where we were just available all the time. The 2010s are for sure defined culturally by social media and movements and division. Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube all hit the scene, shaping identity and power and news and fame and activism. And it also deepened these divides in our country because of our echo chambers. And movements like Black Lives Matter and Occupy Wall Street and the Me Too movement brought some real tensions to the surface. And because of that, trust in institutions like government and church and school and media begin to decline. And for the first time, mental health awareness, specifically around anxiety and depression, began to define younger generations. And then we get to the 2020s, which experts are using these words to define the culture that we're currently in: upheaval, acceleration, and redefinition. Like, I don't have to tell any of us how COVID-19, the global pandemic, totally disrupted everything, right? That's upheaval. Work, church, school, community. And at the same time, there was this accelerated digital trends going on in the midst of a very volatile political season, and it just stoked the division. Like, the 2020s became the decade of mass deconstruction of faith, politics, institutions, even people's personal priorities. Activism and awareness also grew in the areas of racial justice and gender and identity and conversations on environmental urgency. And at the same time, AI and remote work and digital ecosystems started really shaping and reshaping our society. And then there's no doubt, and research backs this up, that an actual mental health crisis began in our country with rising numbers of people struggling with anxiety, depression, loneliness, and suicidal ideation. Culture is always shifting. So much change that we've even been, that's just the last 70 years. Culture's always shifting, always changing. I do have some good news for us today, though. No matter what happens, no matter what shifts come in our culture, no matter what changes, we have a God who is the same yesterday, today, and forever. Like, we have a God who doesn't change. We have a God who keeps his promises. He is faithful. He is not just trending. Like, he is a solid, firm foundation for us to place our lives in. And so that's what we're just learning. How do we follow him? How do we follow God in a godless culture, or when sometimes culture is crazy or culture is shifting? And whether you've been a Christian for a long time or whether you're new to this journey or you got baptized last week, like, this is a question for all of us. Like, how do we do it? And we've got some options. I mean, we could freak out. That's what we're really good at, you know? We can just freak out, like there's no hope, and we get super cynical and like, I don't even care anymore. There's no hope for this world. Everything's going crazy. And when we just absolutely freak out, here's the deal. For those of us who have the hope of Jesus Christ, like, there should never be such thing as a pessimistic Christian. Like, we have the living hope. Like, yes, thoughtful. Yes, involved. Yes, heavy-hearted at times. Yes, concerned. But pessimistic, defeated, in despair, that's not us. We have the hope of Jesus Christ. So, I mean, it doesn't work just to freak out and get defeated and in despair. We could also blend in, which is super easy to do. Sometimes we don't even know we're doing it. But the pressures of like family, friends, coworkers, even just what seems normal in culture, we just start to kind of blend in, right? We just kind of start to look like everybody else. And the way that we live and our habits and our relationships really don't look that different from someone who's not following God. Like, we may say that we believe in God, but our lives, the decisions we're making, aren't really displaying that we're following him. We freak out, we blend in, or we can shine. We can actually, in this culture, and when culture shifts and all the changes that go on, we can actually be people who work with integrity, who give generously, who forgive easily, who hold on to both grace and truth through this life. And what happens is we end up influencing the people around us, the culture around us. We can actually live in a way that is distinct. Everybody say distinct. Distinct. I want you to say that because it's not weird. We don't need any more weird Christians, okay? But distinct. That we are just people that are unashamed of the gospel of Jesus Christ and how it is changing us. And this is the way that we want to respond. This is the way that we want to live, that we would shine in this culture. Daniel 12 puts it this way: those who are wise will shine as bright as the sky. And those who lead many to righteousness will shine like stars forever. That's the goal. So as we get into this series, specifically we're talking about culture today. Here's the deal. We're not here to rail against the culture. We are not here to throw stones or like have some sort of holy huddle where we talk trash. This isn't about ridicule or insulting or labeling or vilifying those people, out there. In fact, I love this quote from Rich Villodas. It says, "It really is a terrible evangelism strategy to despise the people you are trying to bring to Jesus." Right? Like, we are here together to spur one another on to actually make a difference in this world. And that is what our guy Daniel did. We're going to go all the way to chapter 1. But just to give us a little background, here's what's going on. In 605 BC, the king of Babylon, his name is Nebuchadnezzar, he conquers Israel, specifically the city of Jerusalem. Jerusalem is where the people of God lived. People that knew God, had faith in God, worshiped God, although they didn't do it perfectly. Like, their story is kind of like run to God, run away from God, cry out to God, rebel against God. Does this sound familiar? Yeah, this is what they did, but they did have faith in the one true God. Anyway, Nebuchadnezzar, he kind of has this like brilliant war strategy. After he would take over a city, he would have his men arrest all the best and the brightest. Anyone that was super educated, nobility, royal family, all the prettiest, and he would bring them back to Babylon to indoctrinate them into Babylonian culture and then assign them to work for him and carry out Babylonian's mission. Well, here's the problem. Babylonian culture, super, super different than what the people of God were living there in Jerusalem. Babylonian culture was actually known for being rebellious and pluralistic and antagonistic and arrogant and actually anti-God. Very anti-God. In fact, even after the city of Babylon is conquered, we still see Babylon, or the reference to Babylon, showing up all throughout the New Testament because Babylon, or like a Babylonian mindset, actually became a metaphor for anything anti-God. It was Babylon. Like, it was that bad. That's how much this culture was. So this is what's going on here. King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon besieges Jerusalem. He loots the place. And then the king ordered Ashpenaz, chief of his court officials, to bring into the king's service some of the Israelites from the royal family and the nobility, young men without any physical defect, handsome, showing aptitude for every kind of learning, well-informed, quick to understand, and qualified to serve in the king's palace. He was to teach them the language and the literature of the Babylonians. And Daniel and some of his friends were among those taken captive. Now, Daniel is between 15 and 17 years old when this happens. Like, can you imagine? Like, you get captured by a foreign nation, taken from your family. He was forced to walk 700 miles to Babylon. That's like walking to Boise right now. He was forced to walk 700 miles, and he goes from this like godly upbringing, this rooted in faith, to this godless, anti-God culture, and his world is just turned upside down overnight. Daniel 1, verse 5 says this is the first thing the king does. He assigns them a daily amount of food and wine from the king's table. They were to be trained for 3 years, and after that, they were to enter the king's service. Now, this wasn't like a totally bad situation if you had been taken captive. Like, some of these young men were excited about this. They're eating and drinking from the king's table. Like, they're getting a high-dollar education for free. They're like getting their master's degree, and then they've got this like job security when they graduate that's going to involve living in the king's palace. I mean, some of it saw it as a sweet deal. Not all of them, though. Among those who were chosen were some from Judah: Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. The chief official gave them new names. To Daniel, the name Belshazzar. To Hananiah, Shadrach. To Mishael, Meshach. And to Azariah, Abednego. Take these young dudes. They shave their heads. They give them a new language. They give them a new diet. They surround them with a new culture, and they even give them new names. And this is all super intentional. You see, their original Hebrew names were rooted in their identity and relationship to God. where their Babylonian names were trying to reposition their identities in relationship to these Babylonian, like these false gods. For example, the name Daniel means God is my judge. Belshazzar means treasure of Baal or Marduk, which were Babylonian gods. Hananiah means God shows grace. Shadrach means under the command of Aku, which was the Babylonian moon god. Mishael means there is no one like God. Meshach means there is no one like Aku. Azariah, God is my helper. Abednego, servant of Nebo, false god of Babylon. This was the strategy. You see it? The Babylonian strategy started with separation. Like, let's get these young men 700 miles away from everything they've known, from the godly culture they grew up in. And the reason why is you walk like who you walk with. Right? If we wanted to program someone to live in a whole new way, you got to first get them away from the environments that they have known, the relationships that they have had. You start with separation, and then the strategy becomes deconstruction. You just start to strip it all down. Your family is taken. They had their identities stripped, their language gone, their belongings gone, even their names. Just tear it all down and then consume. Consume, consume, consume all that Babylon has to offer. We'll start right here. King's food, king's wine. Read the books, memorize the text, sing these songs, wear these clothes, watch the Babylonian news. Rebel a little bit, see how that feels. Like, just indulge yourself in all of it, which leads to indoctrination, where this is just who you are now. You work for Babylon. You eat, drink, and breathe Babylon. You think like Babylon. You talk like Babylon. You are Babylonian. This was their strategy, and I'll tell you something that I've learned from my own life. The enemy of our souls, the devil, who Jesus calls a thief because he comes to steal, kill, and destroy, he uses a similar strategy on us. Separation, deconstruction, consumption, and then one day we wake up and we don't even know how we've become who we've become. But Daniel, he saw right through it. Daniel 1:8 says, but Daniel resolved. I love that word. Daniel resolved not to defile himself with the royal food and wine, and he asked the chief official for permission not to defile himself in this way. Now, the reason Daniel didn't want to defile himself with this food, first of all, he was Jewish and this was not kosher, but also this food had been offered up to the false gods of Babylon as worship. And so Daniel knew that participating would not only be going against what he knew was right for him, at the same time, it would be like endorsing or embracing this worship. And he was like, I'm not about that. And maybe you're sitting there thinking, like, what is the big deal? Like, it is a meal. Like, what's the big deal? But Daniel could see what they were doing. Daniel had wisdom. Daniel could see what was happening. He knew, if I start to engage, slowly, it's going to begin to change me. And I'm going to wake up one day 3 years from now, and I'm going to be Babylonian. Like, he knew if he just went along, there might come a day when he would wake up and realize that he had completely abandoned everything he once held dear. And Daniel didn't want that. Daniel had wisdom. Daniel resolved. Another translation says that Daniel made up his mind. He's like, this is as far as I go. And here's the thing. Daniel made up his mind before he knew the end of his story. Like, he didn't know how it was going to turn out. Daniel made up his mind in this moment before he read the book of Daniel, right? Like, he didn't know how this was going to go. But Daniel made up his mind because he could predict the end of his story if he did go down this path. And that's not what he wanted, so he resolved. He drew a line and he said, I will not go any further. And you all, he was 15, 16, 17 years old. And he had resolve. He had wisdom. He made up his mind. He drew a line in his heart. He was going to honor God. He wasn't falling for the culture around him. And I think that is just so impressive. And honestly, I am so impressed by the young people in our culture today in 2025. Did you know that it is the younger generations that are leading the way in spiritual searching, in revival, in turning to Jesus? I mean, it is amazing. Yeah, I'm here for it. Like, did you know that for the first time in many, many decades, the generation that is, get this, leading in regular, consistent church attendance is actually Gen Z. Gen Z followed by millennials. And this has been a crazy uptick since 2020. You see in 2020 where it's at, I think we've got a graph that shows that, and just how much it's grown. That there's generations of young people searching. I read a recent article this week, that was just talking about how they want God and how they want hope and how they're a generation that is fierce and zealous. And so they're starting to pray and believe actually that God could do huge things through them, and so he is. Jenny Allen, who leads a movement called Unite across college campuses in this country, where thousands of college students are coming to faith in Jesus Christ. She says this: they've gotten everything the world has to offer through the little screens they've held since they were born. They've tasted it all and they realize that it's hopeless. They want something to mean more than the world that they're being offered. And I just want to say really quickly, sidebar, if you're a student, a young adult, a teenager in this room, this church is here for you. And we believe in you. And we want to invest in you. Your faith matters. Your resolve matters. Your leadership matters. Like, you have a calling on your life and a purpose for your life that's not a someday kind of thing. It's a right now kind of thing. I know so many students here at Mission that are they're shining at their schools. In their workplaces, on their teams, in their neighborhoods, in their friend groups. And we're so proud of you. Like, we want to come alongside you. We want to catch some of your passion. We want to give you any wisdom we've got. We want to help you know, yes, you can resolve in your heart to honor God and live for him, and it will be the best decisions you've ever made. Daniel, although he was young, he resolved. He made up his mind, and he says, I'm sorry, sir, is there any way that me and my buddies could not eat all this stuff? And now God, two so important words in Daniel's whole story. Now God would use Daniel's decision to honor him to actually direct his life. And this is what God will do for you too. Daniel, as he makes decisions that are countercultural, that take a lot of courage. Daniel, as he takes steps in faith, God paves the path. God makes a way. God opens doors. God stays with him. God goes before him, because that's how God is. Now God had caused the official to show favor and compassion to Daniel. But the official told Daniel, I'm afraid of my lord the king, who has assigned your food and drink. Why should he see you looking worse than the other young men your age? The king would then have my head because of you. So, God gives Daniel favor with this official who's like, dude, I like you. I would probably let you, but I can't have you looking all weak. Instead of the other men, the king would kill me. And then I think it was one of those wink situations, because he's like, how about you? I can't do anything, but if you go ask that guy over there, maybe he could help you. And so Daniel then said to the guard, whom the chief official had appointed over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, he says, please, test your servants. For 10 days, give us nothing but vegetables to eat and water to drink. Then compare our appearance to the young men who eat the royal food, and treat your servants in accordance with what you see. So he agreed to this and tested them for 10 days. And get this, at the end of the 10 days, they looked healthier and better nourished than any of the young men who ate the royal food. So the guard took away their choice food and their wine that they were to drink and gave them vegetables instead. This is unreal. To these 4 young men, God gave knowledge and understanding and all kinds of literature and learning. And Daniel could understand visions and dreams of all kinds. And at the end of the time set by the king to bring them into his service, the chief official presented them to Nebuchadnezzar. And the king talked with them, and he found none equal to Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, or Azariah. So they entered the king's service. In every matter of wisdom and understanding about which the king questioned them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and enchanters in his whole kingdom. Y'all, I love this, because here you've got this king, Nebuchadnezzar, who does not believe in the same God that they believe in. He does not share their personal values. He does not share the same political views. He does not see the world the way that they do, but these guys have been conducting themselves in such a way as outsiders and exiles in this foreign land that impresses him so much that he gives them a platform to influence his life and actually to influence the entire empire of Babylon. I mean, it's amazing. And do you know what they do with this influence? We're going to see this in the weeks to come. But they shine. They shine like stars in the universe. They shine in that culture, and I want to live like that. You know, the enemy of our soul, he does have a same kind of strategy as Babylon. He's a thief. He wants to steal, kill, and destroy our futures, our influence, our potential. But Jesus says he's the thief that comes to steal, kill, and destroy, but I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. That there's a way for us to live in this culture where we're not just surviving Babylon, but we're actually thriving in Babylon. And that starts with living in community instead of separation. This is how we're going to thrive. One anothering one another, walking with one another, being with one another, loving one another, spurring one another on, encouraging one another, forgiving one another. Like, I just want to encourage you, man, when we get separated, it's so much easier for the enemy to pick us off. Show up at church, like Gen Z. Show up at group. Show up at Second Saturday. Get a fire pit of people together. Start a group chat of encouragement. Take them to coffee or lunch. Like, we need one another. Community is how we thrive within our culture. Also, that we would be a part of restoration instead of destruction. Like, instead of tearing down or just being so focused on what used to be or what we used to have or what's gone away, and so now we're just going to rip apart our culture and tear everything down. Like, that's not thriving. We were created to build. Like, build lives that honor God. Create rhythms for our families to flourish. Repair relationships. Pour our energy actually into something meaningful, like meaningful work and meaningful meals and meaningful generosity and meaningful service and meaningful relationships. Like, that's where it's at. I'm so convinced that if we took all the time, which I think is like an average 3.5 hours a day that we spend, trolling and scrolling and commenting and tearing down and complaining, and we actually use those hours instead to build, create, repair, and restore things in this world, we would be thriving and our communities would be better for it. It's also living a life marked by wisdom, not consumption. Wisdom, not consumption, that we would have the wisdom of Daniel to know where our appetites might just take us, right? Because here's the thing about appetites. I'm sure you know this, like I've learned this. When we feed an appetite, it doesn't go away. When we feed an appetite, it grows. And the more we participate, the more we indulge, the more we consume, the easier it gets because it lessens our resolve. So much easier to cheat the second time, or to drink a little more next time, or to go back to that site once you've been on it, right? Whatever it is, consume. I heard someone talking this week, calling our culture right now that we have a problem with mental obesity because we've consumed so much in here from our phone consumption every single day. And we get to choose to have wisdom with this stuff. We get to choose instead to draw a line in our hearts to say, hey, that's as far as I go. I'm living with resolve. I'm honoring God. I don't want to wake up someday and be somebody that I don't recognize. So I'm drawing the line right here, and I'm letting God direct me. And that leads to influence in our community, with one another, that we would actually be distinct in this culture, and we would shine. And I want this to be true of every follower of Jesus. I want this to be true for myself, but I specifically here for those of us that call mission home, I want us to be the kind of people that other people in our community and our families, when something happens, they're like, I got to find one of those mission people. Because they help. And they forgive, and they're open-handed, and they're kind. You know what? They're the best tippers. I love it when they come in on my shift. They work with the best attitudes, like they're joyful. There's just something that's real about them. Let's let that be us. Here's the truth. You were not created to freak out or blend in. You were created to shine. And so may his compassion be caught through us. May his love be brought by us, that this world may spot in us Jesus, the light of the world. Father, I thank you. I thank you so much for the way you never change, you never fail, that you are a firm foundation, that we can run to you, that even when the world shifts, you remain the same. Thank you, God. Thank you, God. We do believe in you, and we trust you, and we ask you to lead our lives. God, give us the courage to have resolve and to shine in this world and in this culture. In Jesus' name. Amen.